Discipline is like the skill of an artist that cultivates and refines the skill simply out of the deep desire and delight to create more.
Welcome to the Connect Method Parenting Podcast, where correction is out, connection is in, and your kids want to listen to you. I'm Andy Martineau, creator of Connect Method Parenting, here to help you stay calm, confident, and connected no matter what. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast today. We are kicking off the second week of Pivot at the time this recording is going live, and it's been the most incredible, fun, exhilarating experience bringing so many new people and so many people who've done it before with me and are repeating it into this round of the Pivot. I'm updating all of the lessons and I'm doing it here in Rome. I found the best studio. It's so fantastic. It's about a 20-minute to 30-minute taxi ride or an hour on the bus. And so I'm going there and recording the lessons, and we will finish all of the redo of the lessons this week. Well, actually, I have one little bit next week I'll do, but it's going to be done. I made the decision to re-record and update everything a while ago, but I didn't have time to do it before we left the States. And I'm so glad that I found this place. So if you're in the Pivot, first new round of lessons went live this week. We'll be updating week 1 and you'll get those in retrospect, but I'm so excited for you to get them. It's going to make the Pivot even that much better. It was already so great, but even that much better. But because I've been doing all of that, I have not recorded a live episode for you this week. Well, you are getting a live episode, but it's literally live. I didn't just record it. It's from a live training I did about a year ago, and I found it. I think it's perfect. So there is some interaction with the people that were there, and there's reference to the seen and heard framework, which you can see a diagram of in my book. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes where you can get a copy of the digital version of the book for free. Or if you'd rather have the hard copy or the Kindle version, you can get that on Amazon. I also did release the audio version of it. You can get it on Audible and all the places. But if you want to listen to it on this podcast feed, you can. And you just go back to summer sometime. I don't remember the exact episode, but you can listen to the audio. But that was not going to help you with the seen and heard framework diagram if you're a visual person. So check out the link in the show notes, and you'll be able to get a copy of the digital book version of it so that you can check that out. I also just have to say, right before I recorded this little intro for the episode today, I was looking in the discussion board. We have this awesome discussion board going on inside of the Pivot, and there have been so many wins. I'm not going to use their names because I don't have permission to use their names, but I just have to tell you that the wins are fantastic. One of the moms in there was sharing that she had gone to the park and she'd been struggling with getting her child to leave the park. I know we can all relate, right? Leaving the park is so hard for our kids. They do not want to stop playing. They want to stay with their friends. They just want to be outside. I mean, I get it. They don't want to come back. So we were dialoguing about it in the discussion board, and I gave her some ideas, and she said, we went to the park again today, and I made sure I spent intentional, and then she does all caps, intentional time at the end with her, which is one of the things I suggested she do with her daughter. And we sat and we talked about acorns and rocks that she had found. We discussed which ones she was going to take home, and that when her sister came back from walking, it was going to be time to go. And then she said, sister came back. I said, okay, let's get our baby acorns. And she wanted me to help her pick them up. She was tired, and we went to the car and left. So great. So great. She's like, I would say this is a huge win. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And then there was another one that came in that she was talking about how she hadn't been feeling well and her daughter had come home, and, it was just the perfect storm. I'm not feeling well. The daughter's coming home. She's crying because she got caught talking when she wasn't supposed to. And normally, she said, my brain would immediately start thinking things like, this is pretty cut and dry. Like, we just don't talk, next time. But she said, I kept that to myself and said, I listened with her and I stayed with her and reminded herself that, sometimes when things, don't work out, that she feels discouraged and upset too. And she was celebrating herself which is huge, because she knows that in her in her habits, she talks too much and she's trying to be quiet and listen and honor the emotions her daughter's going through instead of discounting them. So that was a huge win. And then on office hours this week, it was from a mom who's been working with me for a little while, and she's been so amazing, understanding the challenges that she's had and the way she's lost her temper and been really short with her kids, and just has been committed to figuring out how to calm herself down. And her son at bedtime the other night, she said, was washing his hands and they were getting ready, doing all the nightly things, getting ready for bed. And he said, "Mom, thank you so much for not yelling anymore." It was a beautiful moment that she had, such sweet validation for all of the work she's been doing. So I'm just loving what's happening in the pivot. So anyway, we'll be doing another pivot in January with a new group. You can't get in anymore, but if the new group is starting in January, and I might do, let me know if you're interested, but I might do something special for Black Friday if people want to reserve their seats for the January pivot. I haven't decided yet, but I'll keep you posted. Oh, and also one more thing. If you have a second and you've been enjoying this podcast, if you could take just 30 seconds and leave a review, that would mean so much to me. I love creating value on this podcast. I love getting it out to parents and helping them understand the essence of Connect Method parenting. And one of the ways that the podcast gets out to more people is if there's more reviews. That's how they decide if it's worth sharing with other people who are searching up parenting stuff. So I know it's a pain to leave a review, but if you could do that, I would love it so much. All right, let's jump to this live training from about a year ago. It's so good. Here we go.
I'm so excited to have this call with you today. Okay, I have 2 book recommendations for you today. One is just a super simple one. And there's so many versions of this kind of book, but I was thinking this week about so many things. But in the seen and heard approach, that the tool that we talk about that we're going to dive into a little bit more today, there's the see, right? The first part is see. And so seeing is so important when there's off-track behavior and when there's not off-track behavior. And this book came to mind. It's called Wherever You Are, My Love Will Find You by Nancy Tillman. It's just super cute. It's just not a lot of words. You can find things at the library like this, but just talking about no matter where you are, what you're doing, like I will be there with you. It's a very good connection rooted book with talking about this attachment and the strengthening, especially if you have any age kids. I mean, obviously this is like a hard book. So this is one for, meant for little kids that are going to chew and tear or whatever. But I love this kind of book, even for big kids, even for me, just remember like where I am and rooted. So this is a great one, fun to read to your kids, fun to read to yourself, fun to just have like laying around, see if it brings up any kind of conversation. The other book is a little bit longer. It's actually like got pages, but it's mostly like lots of pages, but not a lot of words. It is one of my favorite books. In fact, I was laying on the floor the other day, the book was, and my daughter who's in college came home and we were chatting and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I love it." She'd never seen it because I didn't know about this book when my kids were little. It's called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy, I think, or Maxey. I'm not sure exactly how to say his last name. He's a very talented artist. So the pictures are beautiful, but just the message is so sweet and kind and loving. And it gets me thinking. So anyway, she picked it up because she hadn't seen it. I hadn't read it to her because she's gone. And she's like, "I love this book. It's so pretty." And I'm like, "I know, I wish I would have known about it when I was, when you were little." So anyway, beautiful book. Highly recommend it. I'm an avid reader. So I always like to recommend those. Okay, let me see. I wanted to start with a poem today. And I read a poem from the same poet a few weeks ago. I have his little book here. So I've just been kind of glancing through it as I've been, going through my days. And he is just really talented. And this poem just really spoke to me about especially about what we're talking about today. So there's no title to it. It's called, I call it The Tear Catcher, but he doesn't actually have a title for it. And it's going to be included. I asked his permission, and it's going to be included in the Connect Method parenting workbooks that I'm sending out to you very soon. So that's exciting, but I'm going to read it today because it sets it up perfect for what we're talking about. It says, "You found me sobbing on the lawn and you asked why I was crying. I forced a smile and said, my heart keeps breaking. I expected you to try to talk me out of my breakdown. Instead, you simply touched my wet face with your open palm and my tears sunk into your soft skin like seeds. And suddenly a small vine with pink blooms grew out of your wrist and it wrapped around me. And suddenly there were dozens of these little vines with little with these pink blooms sprouting out of view and swaddling themselves all over me. And suddenly the space that once existed between us became a garden of pastel mercy. And suddenly I heard a thunderclap inside of me. Suddenly every single tear I was hoarding started to downpour out of my eyes, down into the soil of your kindness. And suddenly you began to grow like a blazing sun, and the garden we were growing became thick and wild. Suddenly, I could only smell the flowering fragrance of peace that to me smelled just like lilacs, though I'm told it smells differently for everyone. And suddenly I could feel one of your vines slip in under one of my scars and wrap around my heart. Oh, this gets me every time. And suddenly I could feel the vine stitching my broken pieces back together. And suddenly the other vines lifted us both off the ground and up into the August sky. And suddenly we became tangled together in the jungle of paradise of connection that only exists between two trembling humans. Oh, my love, there are so many miracles that can happen when a teardropper meets a tear catcher. It causes a chemical reaction that makes every other element to gawk and gather. It causes a cosmic reaction that summons an angel to come and sing us love songs from the trees. Oh, empathy is my favorite form of magic. Sometimes the simplest of questions can grow a new Eden. Sometimes the simplest of acts of mercy can restart Genesis. Oh, my love, thank you for asking what was wrong. I love that poem. Okay, I wanted to start off with that because I feel like today, and we'll get to your questions as well. I see some coming in, but I wanted to start with that today because this idea of being present, seeing our kids, being seen, right? Being noticed, being observed, being asked what's wrong. Like, why are you crying, right? Those simple things are at the essence of creating an amazing relationship with ourselves, right? We can do that for ourselves, but really here in the context of as a parent, right? With our kids. And so when I read that poem and I was listening to like the imagery that he was using and this idea of the connection that grows between us and the warmth and the safety and the security that happens when we open ourselves up to just notice somebody. And I love how it says in the poem, which spoke to me, just this idea that we're not trying to fix, right? We're not like trying to talk them out of it. We're not trying to necessarily, first at least, right? As we're coming into conversations or situations, we're really coming in with this openness, with this acceptance, with this allowing, with just like really curiosity and compassion. And I love at the end, it just said, thanks for asking what was wrong, but not trying to fix me. And the idea of the vines like growing between them and healing each other, like that's the power of being profoundly seen and heard. And so as we talk about parenting, I want us today, especially, I want us to be thinking about the power of seeing, being seen in a way that heals ourselves and our children, right? In a way that allows the emotions, the energy, the behavior to bubble up and release so that the true nature of who we are and what we're about can be seen, can be, for our kids can come out. So today I'm going to get to your questions, but I'm going to come to them in a little bit. I want to start with this because I think it's going to set the foundation for the answers that, especially for the questions I see, for the answers for those. So hold on, I'm going to get there, promise, and we will answer all of those things. This week, we're picking up kind of where we ended last week. We were talking about big emotions and why kids feel that way and how important connection is for us to really be able to do anything. We know this intuitively with other adults. We would never push ourselves into a conversation or into a relationship if we didn't feel like there was some acceptance or allowance on the other person's part, right? To be there, like they were engaging with us, right? We had a working relationship, but with kids, we bulldoze through it all the time. So we're talking about like really noticing that and saying like, am I creating that connection? And when it's broken, am I allowing myself to notice it and pause before bulldozing, right? And to understand the importance of it. And I'm not saying like, be friends and don't have any, boundaries or rules. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying, hey, what happens when we start to realize maybe how sometimes we push through when our kids are obviously sending out an SOS message to us saying, I am not doing okay right now. Like, I can't even talk about that because I can't even like think straight, right? So backing up. So how the importance of that, that's kind of what we talked about last week. So coming into this week, I wanted to talk about like pick up where we left off and dive into the seeing part of the seen and heard approach, right? The way we talk about interacting with our kids, what we're replacing consequences and rewards and bribes and ultimatums and timeouts, what we're replacing those tools we've been using, those older outdated tools that I feel like don't really breed the warmest, safest connection. What we're transferring in on that, or replacing, that is the right word, replacing. So I'm going to share my screen for a minute. And if you're listening to the replay and you're in the podcast form, I'll try to link these in the notes somehow. So I wanted to start actually here. This is one of my favorite quotes by Dr. Gordon Neufeld, who is an amazing, amazing developmental psychologist and theorist. And he says, unconditional parental love is the indispensable nutrient for the child's healthy emotional growth. The first task is to create space in the child's heart for the certainty that she is precisely the person the parents want and love. Then the child can be ornery, unpleasant, whiny, uncooperative, and plain rude, and the parent still lets her feel loved. So a lot of the work here we do is talking about all the different components that go into creating this kind of presence with our kids, right? We've got to be clearing up our own brain. We've got to be inspecting our thinking and our belief system and our interpretation of their behavior and their emotional outbursts, right? We've got to be thinking about the importance of our time. There's so much part for like as us parents, right, that we're bringing to the table. And then it's like, then what do I do? Like if I'm feeling good, right, then what do I do? Because our kids will still be kids. They're still immature. They're still developing. They're still growing. So they're going to have those emotional immaturities inside of them. And then we might have some of our own emotional immaturities we're bringing, right, from hurts that we had, or, you know, little incidences that got programmed in our subconscious brain saying like problem, right, fear, whatever. So we have our own stuff that we're working through. They have their stuff. How do we come together and be able to provide this unconditional love, right, that we want? So we have that on the table, and don't use this quote against you. Don't use it to shame you, nothing like that, right? I'm just throwing it out there because I think he says it so, all the components that I want to say so beautifully, so succinctly. And just the idea, I think, as I read this, one of the ideas that comes up for me is that, of course, I have unconditional love for my children, but sometimes if I'm not in a good place, or if I am not interpreting their behavior well, it's not really showing, right? It's not really evident. It's not the thing that's coming to the surface. It's frustration that's coming to the surface. So it's hiding my unconditional parental love. So I want to get into a practice of cleaning the windows, or the whatever you want to call it, imagery we want to use, so that the unconditional love that I have for my child can come through, even if I'm having to set a limit, even if I'm having to deal with some, undesirable behavior or some really big emotions that are triggering for me. How can I make sure that the compassion, the love is coming through, and the firmness, right? And I'm balancing those out. That's usually very off balance if we haven't done our own work, right? We're so up in arms, really, because we have our own nervous system reactions. We're into fight or flight or fawn or freeze ourselves. And so we're not able to really show up that way. So think about this. I love this quote, so beautifully said. And I'm going to go on to this next thing about discipline, because one of the things that we talk about is replacing, right? And shifting and transforming. And I know, at least for my brain, when I started trying to really evaluate and get curious, I tried to use a lot of willpower and discipline. And I think I was a little confused. Sometimes I'm still confused about what that means. So this is the definition that I love to think about when I'm thinking about discipline. And it says, discipline does not mean doing something hard that you do not like, right? Like I got to be thinking about this terrible behavior differently, or I've got to forgive myself, but I was awful when I yelled last night or something, right? Or I've got to exercise, right? Is a great one that we use. Discipline, I think, in a way that doesn't serve us. So discipline doesn't mean doing something hard that you don't like, pushing through, right? It's not that. Discipline is like the skill of an artist that cultivates and refines the skill simply out of the deep desire and delight to create more. Isn't that such a pretty, I love the way that it's all said. It's not the definition in the dictionary, but it's my definition. I love it. And I like to think about if I'm trying to shift something or change something, instead of having it come from this really place of lack or insufficiency, it's coming from a place of creation and imagination. And what can I create, right? This deep desire and delight to create more. And for me, it's more beautiful relationships, trusting relationships, more patience, right? All of these beautiful conversations that I want to have with my kids. So just throwing it out there. I love this definition, and think about what you think. Would that be a fit for you for discipline? Would that help you as we're moving into more and more change, right? More and more flipping the script, right? So that we can change the way we interact with our kids as a parent, and how we discipline, how we help them see and train them, right? And teach them and help them become and fulfill their potential. So here's the seen and heard approach in diagram form. Most of you have probably seen this before. It goes back to really this innate human need we have to be seen, to be heard, to be validated, to be like the poem said, to just like to be cared for, but not fixed, right? And I think as parents, as we're interacting with our kids, we sometimes forget the cared for part and we overemphasize the fixed part. And we don't trust as much as we would like to because, and for good reason, we've been conditioned in society. It's been, just passed down from generation. Everybody's been doing their best they can. So there's no shame, no harm, nothing like that. I'm just saying we forget sometimes that the power of seeing, the power of being with somebody, and we go right into just trying to fix them. And really, a lot of times that comes because it's so uncomfortable for us to see them hurting or to see them crying or to see the behavior going the way it is. And so it just, we want to change it, right? We want to make that go away so we feel better because it's hard to just see them hurting. And we're retraining our brains here to say like, hey, let's be okay with other people being humans, right? We're all in this experience. None of us are having this, perfect experience. Although I think it is perfect. It's just not perfect in our perspective sometimes of what we think perfection should be, what we think our lives should be, or our kids' lives or experiences should be. We don't think they should, struggle in school or with friends or say something rude. And perhaps I'd like us to question that. Perhaps actually that's not true. Maybe that is exactly what they need to become and to learn, and maybe for them and for us, right? And we can navigate that together and they can grow into their full potential. So see and bridge are the two kind of end caps, with the middle things being able to be used: set, direct, play, stay, in any order and in any combination like needed. Now, this is not just something to be used when there's off-track behavior. It's definitely applicable to building a relationship, growing and making people feel more seen and heard, whether things are going off track or whether things are going great. And you're being intentionally like proactive about the connection you're making. It's bi-directional, which I think is so powerful. One of the things that has just really stood the test of time. So today we're going to talk mostly about the C, but I just wanted to flash this all up there for just a minute so everybody could just kind of see the whole thing in a glance. I'm just to refresh everybody's memory. Okay, so here's kind of it broken down like another layer deeper, right? So the C, which is always what we start with. And then within it, I've parsed this out and I call it the stop, drop, and roll. It just basically is taking C and like zooming in. That's the right thing. Zooming in, magnifying it, right? So stop, drop, and roll. And each of these letters, they're kind of each acronym. So the brief version is stop and listen, drop into your body, which means like get present, right? And roll with it, don't resist it. But taking it even another layer deeper, stop, which is my favorite one. They're all great, but my favorite one, because it's the first step, is like see the other person. So I wrote down what, stop, C for S, the for T, other person, see the other person. So instead of like rushing in and seeing the behavior or seeing the emotion or seeing the chaos or seeing the mess or seeing whatever our brain wants to see, the problem, right? We're seeing the person, we're seeing the child, we're honoring them, we're remembering how amazing they are. So see the other person, then drop is don't react, observe patiently. So we're going to give ourselves a pause, take ourselves out of the drama for a minute and not react, just observe it patiently. And then roll is relax, open, listen, learn. And those are really the steps that we need to go through, especially if there's a problem going on, especially if our brain's like problem, behavior, problem, emotion, like stop. These three steps that are kind of sub-steps of C are what we want to do before we take any other steps. And then there's a question, this goes into stay, which we're not going to drop into today, but the question is this emotion or situation need more compassion, understanding, or listening? If that's the case, if it just needs more compassion, understanding, or listening, then we're going to stay, right? We're going to stay with the emotion, the situation until they're ready to move on. But there's other paths that might take. They're not delineated on this little chart, but just so you can see, I want you to zoom in on the C part. So this allows us to get present, to observe, to listen, to learn, and to allow ourselves to understand, okay, next step is what, right? So what I want to talk about is the rewards of staying, which is really a return to safety. So if your child's having a difficult time, if they're having really big emotions, right? If they've maybe had some really tricky things happen in their lives. And this goes on, Tina, I'm seeing your question. So this is going right along with answering your question. Let me just read all, see if there's any other parts. Yeah, so it sounds like your little kiddo, your 5-year-old's having a lot of emotions come out. Yeah, and I love what you did. I didn't want to lose it. So dad switched places and she punched him. She's 5. I don't even know. Yeah. So we're going to tap into all of those things. This is like addressing your question specifically. So keep listening, Tina. And if you have more questions, follow-up questions, let me know if this doesn't answer it. So when your child, well, some of what you're talking about is seeing and staying, right? And so we're going to focus more on seeing, but also on, they overlap. Everything, is interrelated a bit. It's not like totally isolated from each other, but we're going to drop more into seeing, but like, let's just talk about really quickly the benefits of seeing them, the benefits of staying with them when they have a tantrum is that it allows them to eventually, and if the hurt is piled in there, if they have a lot of layers, this might take multiple explosions, right, to get it out. Their nervous system is like purging and they don't feel safe and they're feeling, just they're reactionary, right? And they haven't been able to, they might still be in attack mode where the energy is having to get out of their body, but it's like attacking, hitting, slapping, right? It's just like that. And a little bit of that can happen in like when they're just releasing too, but it's like asking ourselves, like, how am I interpreting the behavior, right? What am I making it mean about the child? And just looking at that. In fact, I was just over at a friend's house and I heard one of the other moms talk about one of her little people and say like, oh yeah, she's really mean, and I thought it's really interesting. Some of the labels or the judgments or just the way sometimes we are seeing our kids, right? The way we are interpreting their behavior, the labels we're putting on them. And I would just recommend that we just really question ourselves when we say things like that. I've done it too. So it's not like a judgment at all of her. It's just, it was really interesting to notice and reflect on my own patterns that I've had. And just to say, what benefit does that do me or my child when I do that, right? So let me just back up. When your child has finished the tantrum, so we're going to go to that. And it's like I said, this could happen. And I've had this experience where it's not a one and done thing. It's not like, our brains wish it was one big tantrum, let all the emotions out, right? But we're constantly going through life. So there might be new things that trigger us or new things that our nervous system files away as dangerous that we, are causing us to have some pent up emotions. Or it could be that we have a lot of stored ones and it might take some time. It might take lots of time. It might take months. It might take just, really being clear on where we are so that we're not there being with them, but still very resistant, which I've done, right? It's like learning for us too, how to be there with them without the judgment. That is our work. It's tricky work. It's hard work. It's good work. It's fulfilling work. It's so empowering and freeing work, but it's real work, right? So when we have started to get to the place where our child can release the emotions, and we're saying in a really welcoming space about it, our children are freshly relieved of their upsets and are generally more relaxed, affectionate, flexible, and are usually free or mostly free of the irrationalities that they had leading up to outburst. So I'm going to just talk for a minute. So, okay, off-track behavior equals limit, right? So when your child's thinking has broken, when they're flying off the rails, when they are having the big tantrums, and when they're little, it's so much more obvious, like as far as like they're literally flailing on the floor. For teenagers, it's like they're rolling their eyes at you or, maybe cussing or just avoiding you or going to their room and shutting their door. Like that's their version of broken thinking, right? So when our child's thinking is broken, that means she isn't feeling safe enough to laugh or cry or really even feel. And when this happens, off-track behavior is totally going to follow because it's irrational thinking, right? Your child will do nonsensical things and unworkable things like hurting the cat or yelling at her sister for even just looking in her direction, right? Or crying because you cut the sandwich the wrong way. So this is our cue to step in. She's showing you that her brain has gone haywire because her nervous system doesn't feel safe and connected. Not the other things we're saying, like not because they're mean, not because they're rude, not because they're defiant, right? It's just their brain has gone haywire. Their nervous system has said, I'm not safe. I'm not okay. Something's wrong. And so the thinking goes offline because when we go into fight or flight, we know this on some levels, but we don't always apply it to behavior or emotions in children or humans. The blood, right, goes to the vital organs. It leaves the higher thinking of the brain, right? It's like into like the basic survival. So this is when she's saying like, hey, I need a limit. So your limit, get this goes right along with probably a lot of our questions, but Tina, right along with your question you asked earlier, your limit gives her something or someone to blow up at so that they can release the upset feelings and return to a place of safety and peace and equilibrium. So for a child whose behavior is flaring, your gentle but firm limit is a gift. Now, they're not going to tell you, thanks, mom, for setting this limit, right? They're probably going to get more mad, but your no or not now, or I can't let you do that, will become the focus of their upset. So your no, I want you to think about this. Your no gives them a point of focus to the nameless tension that has been driving them off track. So now she can let her upset come out and show itself fully. Does that make sense? We don't usually get this information. I wish we did. It show herself fully. She can now let herself have that upset come up and like come out, right? So if we follow this up, so we've seen her, right? We've did all the steps I just talked about. Then we set the limit because we can sure tell that there's like, some unreasonable behavior going on here, right? We're not setting the limit because there's something wrong with her or because she's out of control, being difficult. We're setting the limit because she needs somebody to do it because she can't do it herself. And then we follow up the limit by staying close and listening. Then that's when the gift becomes complete, right? So she's going to have the chance, or he's going to have the chance to release the upset feelings and recover her sense of connection with you and with herself. So here is the trick. We need to try to set that limit without ourselves feeling like we're attacking them or we're triggered or we're frustrated. And this is when our work comes in. This is why so many of our calls, so much of the content within Connect Method Parenting is about us understanding how to get to a place of really open love, acceptance, right? So when we can set the limit without frustration or attacking, I want you to see if you can relate to this, because it's something that probably you've done as a parent or was done to you, right? We're humans, right? This is no blame, shame at all. We've all probably either done this to our children on accident or had it done to us because someone else was triggered. So I'm guessing you can relate on both counts. I know I sure can, but not because my parents weren't wonderful. They were amazing, but they're still humans, right? And so sometimes the emotions get elevated and we explode. We all do it. So here's typically what happens. Behavior goes off track and we do one of a couple of things. Maybe we silently or not so silently hope from the other room that it's going to just go away. Maybe we wait for few minutes and just like ignore it, right? Maybe we say something like, you guys better stop it in there, right? I've done that. So we're trying to change it. If we think about the circle of big emotions, right? The first thing when we start to feel, because when they start fighting, most of the time, if we haven't done this work, this gets better the more we do this work together, guys, I promise. But especially if we haven't done the work, or sometimes just some things just rub us and we're working on it. We're trying to understand it, but there might be some behavior our kids do, maybe the siblings fighting each other, maybe leaving messes, maybe when they, whatever it is, right? It doesn't matter, whatever, you can pick your little trigger, right? Situation. So there might be things that are extra triggery for you for whatever reason. That's totally fine. It's just let's look at them, let's see them, no judgment, right? So some things happen. And if we're in a place where it starts to build a little bit of frustration or angst or irritation or anxiety or anxiousness, whatever your picked emotion, your favorite top emotion is. So when things are happening with the kids and we're like, I cannot take this. For me, one of them was coming home from say I had finally gotten a chance to go out, right? And run an errand and had a babysitter. And then I'd come home and the house was just destroyed, right? That was really, really, really triggery for me for a long, 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 long time. I had to work really hard on that one. So don't be frustrated if there's ones that are just for some reason feel deeply embedded into your DNA, right? So when things don't change, when I couldn't figure out how to get that behavior to change or the mess to be gone, right? Then we need to notice what's going on in ourselves. So let's use the example of the kids fighting in the other room, right? So when I can't get them to stop fighting, when they're being unreasonable and they're just they're not able to limit themselves and it's getting they're out of control. Maybe they're even saying things to each other that I'm just not okay with, right? Then I need a limit. But when I'm frustrated because they didn't change, that limit or that consequence is what I would have called it, a punishment, right? Is put in place from an angry, frustrated, or disappointed state. So as the adult, sometimes that's us, right? If we're thinking back to a situation with our kids, or sometimes we were the child, right? And our parents were the ones coming in a little bit anxious or agitated with us. Whatever the case is, the adult came in and waited until they had been elevated to the place of anger or frustration. And then they stepped in. So most often, historically speaking, limits, and our brains kind of associate these together. The limits are associated with an attacking energy, I call it. It could have been a physical attack, right? Spanking, hitting, pulling someone's arm, yanking, or worse. It could be a verbal attack, which looks like blaming, name calling, lecturings, little tirades. It could look like a separation attack, which is where we're isolating them from us, banishing them, not really you're banished, but putting them in timeout, cutting them off, telling them they can't be in here, right? Which is really difficult for us as humans. We're very much a relational species. We like to be with other people. It's really important to us. So when we're cut off from the people we love and depend on, it feels really hard. It's really painful. So people don't mean to do this. We don't mean to do it if we've done it as parent. I know I certainly can look back now with so much grace and compassion for myself. I can see times where, as a child, maybe I have memories of it and I don't have any judgments. I'm like, oh yeah, nervous system's out of control, right? It doesn't mean that it was intentional or anything like that. Parents don't mean to hurt kids, right? When they set limits. I truly, truly believe that as human beings, we're all doing the best we can, and that we're trying to do what we think is right by the other human, right? We're trying to raise them. We're trying to make them become their best, like help them step into their full potential, right? We're looking out for their best interests. Another reason I think we do this, or our parents did it to us or whatever, it's habit, right? It's like what we've seen. It's what we've been exposed to. It's what society says we should do. We get in the heat of the moment. We just go into habit mode. Fight or flight mode is another one, right? We're not thinking straight. We're so triggered as the parent, right? That we've flipped our lid. Our thinking brain's gone off. And so I know when I look back on, especially the first few years of parenting, because I had all 6 of my kids in 8 years, which was like, I love it. I wouldn't change a thing, but it was a lot of little people all around. And I think I was in fight or flight mode like 95% of the time, right? So messes became an attack on me. Kids saying no was interpreted as a lack of respect. I think back on those days and I was just so heightened. I was not relaxed. I was not as calm. I was not as patient, right? But it taught me a lot and it catapulted me to really reevaluate why and what I was doing. So both of these things can happen and would happen to me, and they would put me into fight or flight mode, right? Things like I was saying, both of the things when I'm referring to is like the kids not obeying me or there are lots of messes, right? And I can see now how that just triggered the heck out of me and just put me into fight or flight mode. And I was in a suspended really in a fight or flight mode a lot of the time. And it took me feeling that terrible feeling before I was like, okay, like let's do something different. So sometimes, depending on the situation, when parents attack, and I'm using attacking as like any kind of interaction we have with the kids that's fueled out of frustration, right? So they attack their kids, they're subconsciously, here's what I want to say first. Sometimes when we see examples of this was not my experience, but I can see this, that like if we have as parents this idea that life is hard and it's going to be, really difficult and I got to toughen you up, then sometimes parents can come a little bit more harshly with their children because they're trying to like subconsciously prepare them for the mistreatments that the world is going to throw at them. So to try to toughen them up and to get them ready for the real world, they feel like they have to be really hard on their kids. So it's just really interesting to think about all of the different things that might be contributing to how and why we're showing up this way, because it allows us to have the ability to notice it from a place of compassion and love for ourselves. Like we are awesome. Us parents are awesome. Even when we're messing up, we're awesome. And when we can see like, hey, I'm awesome. I really was trying my best. And when I did that thing, I can see now that it didn't accomplish, like when I yelled or when I put those harsh consequences in place, I can tell that now from my perspective that was not going to get me what I wanted, but at the time I was doing my best, right? So we want to look and get curious at ourselves and how we're showing up from a place of love and acceptance, because that's the only way we're going to change. You're not going to change by beating yourself up. So as I'm talking about these things, I want you to just settle into this idea that you've been doing your best. Your parents were doing their best. There's reasons and realities for all of the reasons and things that have happened. And so give yourselves a break and understand that it's fine. Humans are imperfect. We're a bit messy. There's few interactions we have with each other that are neat and tidy. We would like them to be more neat and tidy than they really are, right? So parenting and all the things we have to do as parents is no exception to this. And learning how to do this dance of seeing and hearing our kids, learning how to set a limit from a connective place and firm place all at the same time, right? Staying with them when they're so emotionally like explosive, takes human interaction to a totally new level. We're like entering a new way of being a human that's really accepting what humanity is, right? We're emotional beings. Emotions are actually the fuel that grows us up. We need relationships with other people to allow us to expand and grow. They're also the thing that challenge us, right? To experience more emotions and have more growth. So they feel great, relationships do, and the world and the experiences we have, they feel amazing, but they could also feel very challenging. And we need the pull on both sides. That's why it's so important, though, as we as parents are here showing up, saying like, hey, I want to do this in a more compassionate, loving way, but I also want to be a really responsible parent and help my children, have parameters. I'm not here just to be like willy-nilly. That's why it's so important. And it was so important for me to figure out how to set limits, how to really see and hear my kids, how to play with them, how to bridge any disconnection we might have, right? So we've got to set limits with our kids. They have parents for a reason, right? But a lot of us accidentally turned parenting into controlling. So the seen and heard approach, which believe me, we are like deep diving on this as we dive into our next cycle, which is coming up soon. The seen and heard approach is a framework to cultivate amazing relationships with our kids that are tight, that are trusting, that are connected, no matter what is happening, right? So that we can feel confident saying, okay, I am doing something, right? Because we didn't even know in the past that letting our kids have these emotions come out, how to even do that, if that was even good, right? And what benefit was that? Was that indulging them? Was I helping them learn how to just be, we didn't understand the dance. We thought it was passive or all authoritative. So we use seen and heard when things are great to grow and cultivate and really build that relationship. So they choose us. And we use seen and heard when handling challenging behaviors. So we know how to handle them without rewards, consequence, and punishments. So here is what I'm going to go into this C now. I know I kind of like did a little side check of this day because I think it's important actually. I'm glad I did it because I think it's important for us to understand that what I'm saying, have your brain have evidence that what I'm saying is not like just, play and kumbaya and sing and dance with them all day long. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, let's balance this out and let's strengthen our thinking and our beliefs about ourselves and our kids in a way that allows us to show up in alignment with what we really truly feel about our kid. Let me give you some tools, right, that are going to do that. Because without the set, a lot of times our brains, the setting the limit, I call it just set, without knowing and understanding, I do have an element where we're going to set a limit. Your brain might be like, well, this just feels like nothing, right? Passive. No, nothing could be further from the truth. So let me go through the C again, because it is the first and the fundamental step, and the step that if we can't do this because of where we're at, or our children are so dysregulated because of what's going on in their life that they can't even like look at us in the eyes or connect, then we just really need to slow even further down. So C, the 3 sub-steps that I'm talking about today are stop, drop, and roll. And I love this. I have this vision of being, I think in 2nd grade or 1st grade, I don't know, when the firemen came into the school and they demonstrated, what to do in case of a fire and stop, drop, and roll. So I have this imagery. We were in the music room and I still remember they had us all roll down the middle. They had the kids on either side and we rolled down the middle. The middle aisle was the roll aisle. So hopefully you have some memory, but I think all of us are familiar with this stop, drop, and roll, some memory of being taught it or having it discussed. But even if you weren't, I think it's a super good analogy because a lot of times what is happening in our brain when our children are going ballistic or having crazy shenanigans or fighting, or just the teenagers are really pushing back and having a lot of attitude towards, our brains are like fire, right? It's like an emergency. It's like a fire. It's just like our nervous systems are thinking, put that thing out right now. So I love the stop, drop, and roll because in my brain, it goes right along with what my natural brain wants to call whatever off-track behavior my kids are having. So stop, see the other person, drop, don't react, right? Don't jump into the old ways, observe patiently, roll, relax, open. So we're relaxing our bodies, we're reminding ourselves there's not an emergency. I mean, if there is a true emergency, obviously go make sure everyone's safe. But like, really, this is not like the emergency I think it is. I need to relax myself so that I can have my higher thinking on, open myself up to the possibility that I might not understand what's really going on here, that I might misinterpret the scenario or the behavior or the attitude or my kids, right? And listen and learn so that I can understand how I'm going to proceed, right? So we're going to get close and listen at first. This is the information gathering step. So we're getting down on their eye level. We're getting close to them. We're not saying it from across the room, and we're seeing what's going on. We're asking our kids maybe what's going on, but we're for sure just observing, right? We might ask a question like, why are you yelling? But like only from a place of like curiosity, not like, I'm trying to get the data so I can figure out how to discipline you, right? How to fix you. It's like, I just am really understanding, like, why are you yelling? Are you upset? Are you hurt? Right? We're really trying to understand. Or why do you have to have that, specific treat or that specific chair, right? And we're really genuinely coming with compassion and trying to understand what's happening. And then we're trying to help our children. So our focus is on trying to help our kids, and we're trying to keep our own upset in check for a moment. So to help our kids, we're going to need to focus on them, on their feelings, and understand. Now, if we're triggered, that's when we want to just make sure everyone's safe, do no harm, step out and try to get ourselves my brain says under control, but that's not true. If I get ourselves just in a place where our brain comes back on, where we're allowed ourselves to be human for a minute, we move through those emotions, right? So we can come back level-headed. But if we are able to practice, and for a lot of us, we're going to get a lot of exposure, a lot of trigger training, as they might call it, to starting to retrain our brain, right? Because they're probably having these off-drug behaviors often. So we need to focus on our kids if we can. And in a very short period of time, maybe a minute or so, we can start to, the better we get at this, the more practice we get at this, we can probably start to get an idea of figuring out what's happening, right? Follow the difficult, why is the child having such a difficult time operating normally, right? And this is powerful. So I believe the real problem, the real issue has been that for generations, we had the wrong parenting tools. And if we'd had better tools and support, right, the parents would have understood what was really going on and been able to support children better and been able to be more compassionate and firm. But here's the truth. I don't really think that that's been available, and that's okay, because I think we've kind of been in this for generations, right, in this survival mode just to be alive, right? So it's just now that we're coming and we're furnishing parents with enough help and information about this, with the science and the neuroscience and the developmental psychology, all of the different things that are coming together and helping us really, I believe, up-leveling and stepping more into who we can be, our potential as humans, right? And specifically here as parents. So we've been trying our best. Like I said, we've floundered at times, and now we're here and we're realizing that when we respond, when we try to issue a consequence or stop the behavior from a frustrated place and we attack on accident, we have that kind of attacking energy. Like the problem is the child, right? Instead of there's no problem here, they're hurting. And if I'm feeling a little bit frustrated or agitated or nervous or whatever, then there's something in here I want to look at, right? Inside job. So every attack we do towards our kids hurts our child. We don't mean to, but it does. And just think every time someone comes and maybe yells at us or it says something to us that is like, it can hurt, right? So, and it jams more bad feelings inside of us. And this interferes with the child's ability, like I said, to feel safe, to feel connected, to feel capable. It skews our ability, whether it's happening to us or our kids, just the human ability to exercise good judgment, to feel self-confident. So if we feel triggered and are frustrated, like I said, we want to make sure if as the parent and we're frustrated, right? We're feeling triggered, we're feeling frustrated, and we're in the parent role. We want to make sure that our child feels safe, that the situation rather is safe, and then we'll give ourselves a chance to be listened to laugh, to cry, to tremble, to storm until we come back to our highest thinking. And remember, our child is good, right? And they're simply just having a hard time right now. So we've got to do our own work, which we're not focusing on how to necessarily do that for ourselves today on this call. We do that a lot here, and we will continue to do that because it's such an important aspect of the puzzle. It's an ingredient, right, to this recipe. But we must be doing our own work so we're not easily upset by them, right? And so that we can step more into feeling calm, to feeling accepting, to feeling compassionate towards our children and towards ourselves, right? No matter what's going on. So this is how we begin to consistently see our child's off-track behavior as evidence that they're struggling and needing our help, instead of evidence that there's something terribly wrong, right? So, all right. Now, after you've spent some time figuring out what's maybe happening, you've seen them, you've gone through the stop, drop, and roll phases. These are kind of some questions that I'd love to leave you with today to be thinking about how you decide what to do next. So sometimes when I go in and I'm like, oh, my child just needs more information. So first question, does my child need just information or help? Sometimes our kids just need some guidance and moral support. Maybe they don't know where their backpack is. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe and they can't find something to eat. Maybe they're super stressed about a math test they have the next day, or they can't quite figure out, something or the other, or someone said something unkind at school. It might surface that at least the initial thing that's causing them to be in an agitated state is that they're just needing information or help or guidance or support. So if that's the case, we can address that, right? Another question that I like to ask myself as I'm really seeing them and I'm thinking about, okay, what's the next step, right? And I've evaluated what do they possibly need is, does the task match the child? So if what they've been asked to do doesn't match their ability or their age or their skill, this could be a problem. So if we're expecting our 3-year-old or even our 14-year-old to last for a shopping trip to Target, we're going to be disappointed. We might be asking more than they're capable of right now, right? They might have been capable, the 14-year-old might have been capable of it yesterday, but today they're not capable of lasting respectfully at a Target trip. So if our 16-year-old who's been struggling with school for maybe the last few months and now has up to an hour of homework every night, they might be likely to fail, right? He's going to need a lot of staying, a lot of accepting, and some really good old-fashioned fun to make it through it so that he can regain his confidence and ease around homework. But it will take us really supporting him and being patient through it all to turn the corner on that. So is what's being asked of them matching their current ability, right? Today, in this moment ability. So if not, that's something we can address. We can adjust. We can see, okay, what do I do next? Do I need to stay with them and do the homework? Do I need to talk to the teachers? Do I just need to not worry about this? Do I need to change schools, right? If there was a homework thing, or Target, how can I just leave them home? Because today it's just not the right day, right? And there might be other things to discover and see inside of that too. Another question I ask myself is, do I feel drained, right? There are so many days where the kids are, I can especially look back on those younger years when I was unaware of this information. And there were so many days where my kids were totally being appropriate, but I was exhausted, stressed, or frustrated. And so just them running around the house, laughing and playing with each other in a very normal way put me over the edge. And so this is when often we revert back to punishments, rewards, timeouts, ultimatums, right? Because I said so kind of parenting. So what I have learned is instead, let them know, because even though we have this information, there still might be days where something has happened that's weighing heavy on us. And so we're not as capable of handling, right, the things that are being thrown at us. Maybe physically we're sick, or we had an injury, or we just got the IRS tax bill, right? Or something at work just went terribly wrong, or we had an accident, or whatever it is, didn't get enough sleep. And we're just not feeling so capable. My brain, and if we're not aware of this, our brain will often try to blame outside things, right? Now the kids are really getting on my nerves. And it's it's easy to get on my nerves today, right? So instead of letting that happen, let the kids know that just had a stressful day, I have a headache, or I didn't sleep well, or I'm exhausted, or I'm whatever. And there's nothing wrong with you. It's not you at all. And then decide if you're able to, if you want to do something about the way the child behavior, there still might be something you need to do, right? They might be unsafe. They might be saying really mean things to each other, or throwing things, or climbing on things, or that you need to take care of, right? So you might still have to deal with the behavior, make sure everyone is safe, do no harm, try to come up with as much compassion and firmness as we can muster up on that day. And the kids, really depending on their age, may not give you a lot of time, or may not be very understanding of the difficult day you're having, right? About where you're feeling, or give you much of a break, even though you've had a rough day. So it's just good for us to remember that. How do we navigate this, right? Our child's job is to grow and become, and to play, and to discover, and to live their life fully. So we want to honor that and remember that she's not intentionally, or he's not intentionally trying to make our life hard, right? But if we're feeling drained, and we can keep everybody safe, and you can take some time for yourself, give yourself a little bit of time away, right? To feel our emotions, to move through our own storms, to focus on what's getting us upset, that would be awesome, and not focus on trying to set limits or teach the kids right there. So another question I ask myself is the behavior unreasonable. So if once I've leaned in, I've really gotten present and seen my child profoundly, and I have this sense that their behavior is unreasonable, then they're just off track, right? And I need to set a limit. Then that's the next step, right? It's okay, I need to set a limit. That's what's happening, right? And that's what they need, is a compassionate and firm limit. So I'm going to transition from seeing them to setting this limit, right? So once we've decided that our child's behavior is indeed off track, then we want to move into that place. So I think this is a very, very important conversation. We're rebuilding our parenting framework. So here's a short summary. I want you to just have this on your top of your head today. Your child is good. She or he wants to be loving, cooperative, and close to you. This is in the context of maybe them having a difficult day. When your child's behavior goes off track, it's because they're feeling disconnected. They're feeling hurt. When they feel hurt, they can't behave reasonably. Your firm, kind limit, and sometimes, the time of staying there. A lot of times the set transitions immediately into the stay. So they're kind of like a hand-in-hand thing. So the set and the stay come hand in hand. So the firm limit goes right into you, staying with them and letting them move through that emotion, which can get a little bit big. There's the gift that the set followed by a compassionate and firm stay is like the most amazing gift, right? So just let's keep practicing that. There's no need to attack an unreasonable or emotionally triggered child. That's not going to help us. That's not going to help them. It's not going to solve the problem. We might scare them into stopping, we might bribe them into stopping. We might, ultimatum them into stopping temporarily. But what the child really needs is warmth and closeness in order to heal and change. So the see, set, stay, bridge, if they're having a problem, right? They might even go see. The reason the 4 middle components are not in any particular order, because you might do see, play, then maybe that doesn't work, set, then you might do bridge, and they can be interchangeable. But I just want you to know that as we're interpreting and seeing the kids' behavior in a different way, it's going to change the way we use this tool. It's going to change the way we interpret them. It's going to change the way we feel about ourselves and our confidence level in dealing with whatever is happening. So practice that this week. Remember to be very patient and to be very compassionate with you. The more aware we become of where we've been and what we've done, sometimes the more uncomfortable we can become, the more judgmental of ourselves we can become. So be kind and compassionate with yourselves as you see what comes up for yourself, as you notice maybe some of the habitual parenting patterns that you are in, and just allow them to catapult you to be the catalyst for your change, to be the thing that allows you to grow into the best version of you, right? So be kind and gentle with yourselves and just experiment with this week. And we will continue having amazing Connect Method parenting conversations next week. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I hope that was helpful. I think I got through, or as I'm looking at the questions, I think what we talked about today, it was perfect. That's exactly it addressed what you guys need. So, and I don't see any additional questions. So I'm so glad that was helpful. You're welcome. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for coming. Have a wonderful rest of your Monday. See you guys later. Bye.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, come check out League, my Connect Method parenting coaching program, where we take this material and we apply it using my proven formula. Head over to cmp.works/join.